haven, preserving the eternal annals of Warhammer.
In the last age of fire before the final dusk, when the stars themselves seemed to sigh under the weight of aeons, the fortress world of Titan stood cloaked in silence. High above the warp-shrouded surface of Luna's shadow, the fortress monastery of the Grey Knights shimmered between dimensions, not quite part of real space, not quite of the immaterium. There, where no light of sun or moon could ever reach, the last sons of purity were forged in silence, bound by oath and scar, mind and spirit. The Emperor's most secret sons, his final prayer, cast into the darkness. Titan's sky was empty that night. Even the void-born fauna that sometimes circled the perimeter had vanished, as if they too sensed what stirred deep within the sanctum's vaults. A star had died, far beyond the Astronomican's reach. Its light snuffed out, not by age or time, but by design. And with its fading came a ripple, a psychic wound in the warp, subtle but vast, like a breath drawn before a scream. Inside the librarium arcs, where the walls themselves wept with residual echoes of ancient sorcery, Supreme Grandmaster Kaldor Drygo stood in stillness. Clad in ceramite that shimmered faintly with runes of banishment and warding, he did not move. His eyes were closed, but he saw more than most ever would. The weight of millennia pressed upon his soul. He had walked the impossible path. He had bled in realms where reality had no hold. And though he bore no physical wound, he was broken in ways no apothecary could heal. In the warp, time unraveled and rewrote itself with each step. To the Imperium, Draco had vanished 100 years ago. To him, it had been thousands. Centuries of war, of fire, of dreams torn apart and mended anew. He had slain demons that had never lived, spoken with gods that had forgotten their names. Yet now, he had returned, not through power, not through triumph, but because the veil itself had cracked. The wall between the real and the unreal had weakened, and something ancient was stirring behind it. A voice broke the silence, low, reverent. "He calls to us again, my lord." It was Brother Captain Vortan, his tone brittle, as though speaking threatened to tear the moment. Drago turned his head slightly. His eyes were grey, not lifeless, not cold, but hollow, like the sky above a ruined world. "I felt it," Drago said, and his voice held no tremor. "It speaks through echoes. It mimics his voice now." There was no need to say who he was. The Emperor, or what they feared might be impersonating him. For centuries, the Grey Knights had stood as bulwarks against the storm, each of them created not merely from the genetic material of the Emperor, but from his soul stuff, his psychic essence. They were incorruptible, untouchable, unmarred by sin or ambition, or so they believed, until now. "It isn't just mimicry," Vortan said. "It knows the names, the real ones, from before the founding." Drago turned to face the hololith. Suspended mid-air was the dying star, its flare frozen in its last cry of light. A dead system, no known worlds, no record of human colonization, and yet it had pulsed, a psychic scream in the language only the Grey Knights could hear. The same phrase, over and over. "I remember you." Drago stared into the projection, but he did not see a star. He saw a battlefield, 1,000 years gone, a mountain of burning ash, the face of a demon prince smiling with the face of his brother, a sword carved from paradox, and a promise he had made in a moment of wrath and weakness. "I swore I would return," Drago whispered, more to himself than Vortan. "I carved his name into the heart of the warp, and now it calls me back." Vortan stepped forward. Then we ride again. Silence. No, Drago said. Not yet. We do not ride into shadows without knowing the cost. Too many of our kind have vanished chasing prophecy in silence. But if this is him, it is not. Drago's voice cracked, barely audible, and then steadied. It is not our emperor. It is something older, something buried before the Imperium ever learned to walk. The dying star was not a message. It was a key, and the door it opened was one Drago had sealed himself, in an age now half forgotten even by the warp. He could still feel the pain of it, the betrayal, the one he had left behind. They had been brothers once, not of blood, but of bond. Seraphon, librarian savant of the Third Brotherhood, bound to Drago by duty and love, by shared horrors and quiet faith. Together, they had faced the black oracle of Rithael, slain the Mirrorborn in the labyrinth stars, stood in judgment when the Sigillites debated the fate of worlds, and Seraphon had chosen damnation. He had believed purity was no longer enough, that the warp could be understood, not merely resisted. That salvation required compromise. Drago had struck him down, cast his body into the eye, and carved the banishment rite into the bones of his soul. But the name called now, in whispers threaded through the fading echoes of that star, was not Drago's. It was Seraphon's, and Seraphon had learned how to scream across time. Drago stood very still. The brothers around him, steel-souled, iron-minded, awaited orders. But inside him, something shifted, a flicker, a tremor, a hesitation. He had faced demon kings and never faltered. He had defied fate itself. But now, as the echoes of a forgotten brother reached across the veil, he felt the sting of doubt. Not because Seraphon might live, but because he might be right. "Prepare the Terminus Shard," Drago said at last. "We go to the Ash Expanse, alone." Vorthon hesitated. "Alone?" Drago nodded. "If I fall, none must follow." He turned from the starlight and walked into shadow. Behind him, Titan pulsed in silence, its halls echoing with ancient promises and unspoken truths. And above them all, a star died, not in silence, but in memory. He dreamt of fire again, not the cleansing fire of the Emperor's wrath, but the slow-burning, choking embers that linger after the purity has passed, the kind that clings to the lungs and smoulders inside the soul. Drago stood alone beneath a sky that had never known stars. The Ash Expanse was a graveyard of light, a silent, shattered void, where time folded like brittle parchment. There were no planets here, only debris, drifting bones of worlds broken before mankind had even carved its first city from stone. A place unmarked on any chart, scrubbed from imperial records by order of the Inquisition itself. And yet the psychic scream had come from here, piercing the black like a nail through the skin of the warp. Inside the Terminus Shard, his solitary strike cruiser, veiled in psychic null wards and runes of occlusion, Drago sat in the meditation chamber, surrounded by silence. No servitors, no crew. The ship moved with his will alone. It was better this way. None needed to see what he would become, if this was truly what he feared. He opened his mind to the storm. It came not as a sound, but as a scent. Incense, burnt copper, blood. Then a voice. Calm. Familiar. You remember the oath, don't you? The voice was Seraphon's. Drago did not answer. He focused instead on the memory. A time before the rift, before Cadia broke, before the truth that the Imperium was dying was whispered aloud. Back when the Grey Knights still believed in their own myth. Flawless, untainted, eternal. Seraphon had been brilliant, his mind carved through warp logic like a blade through parchment. He had been Drago's equal, not in strength, but in thought. A scholar among warriors, a poet who could summon storms. And he had asked the one question no grey knight dared. What if the warp is not evil? That question, once spoken, had bloomed like a sickness, not because it was heresy, but because it made sense. He had argued that demons were not born, but shaped, that thought and belief made them what they were, that if mankind could shape reality through the warp, it could change it, not resist chaos, but overwrite it. Drago had listened. He had almost believed, but faith is not forged in logic, and loyalty, once tested, is never whole again. Seraphon had gone too far. The ritual on Lorthax Prime, the bound demon of the Ninth Circle, he had claimed he could cleanse it, reshape it. What he created instead was a shrieking mockery of human thought, a demon that spoke in equations and dreams, devouring the minds of the entire garrison in moments. Drago had ended it, with blade, with fire, and with a single command, he had consigned Seraphon's name to erasure. But now, the name returned. The echo of it haunted every psychic fold of this cursed region. Drago felt it, like a pressure behind the eyes. Not a presence, but a familiarity. The warp did not lie, not to him. It remembered Seraphon, and it mourned him. He opened his eyes. The chamber darkened. The Geller fields flickered for a breath, just enough to let the raw warp lick at the edges of reality, just enough to let something slip through. A figure stood before him, hooded in robes that whispered like pages. No form, no face, not demon, not ghost, memory. "Do you grieve for me, brother?" it asked, voice echoing with broken familiarity. "I grieve for what you could have been," Drago said quietly, "and yet you carved my name into the warp so that none could forget it. Tell me, was that justice or guilt?" Drago rose. He faced the apparition. "I carry no guilt." "Liar," it whispered. He struck. His nemesis blade passed through the figure like smoke. The vision vanished, but the echo remained. A faint laugh, bitter and soft, like someone recalling joy long buried. He breathed deeply, forcing his soul back into stillness. Emotion was a weapon, and in the warp, every weapon could be turned. The ship's warning systems hummed softly. They had arrived. The ash expanse lay outside the viewport, a maelstrom of grey static. Somewhere within, a signal pulsed, a fragment of code, old Terran dialect, encrypted in patterns only the Grey Knights would understand. He decoded it in seconds. One word. Sanctuary. It was impossible. That was the name of their first fortress, the secret one, the one before Titan, before the Inquisition took command of their fate, before Malkador the Sigillite burned the records. Only a handful of the first could even remember it, and one of them had died by Drago's hand, unless he hadn't. Drago clenched his gauntlet. The metal creaked softly. His doubts grew teeth. Had Seraphon truly fallen? Or had he been abandoned? Cast out because he saw the truth too soon, he whispered the canticle of banishment beneath his breath, grounding his mind. The words anchored him, and yet a deeper part of him wondered if the warp remembered Seraphon, did the Emperor. The ship descended. Below, within the heart of the ash expanse, an ancient structure stirred, not ruined, preserved. A cathedral made of black stone, encased in void ice, wrapped in runes so old they predated even High Gothic. No signal beacons, no life signs. And yet, Drago felt it. A heart still beat inside. He landed in silence. Step by step, he walked toward it, his armor heavy with age and intent. The silence was not empty here. It was expectant. The air itself seemed to hold breath. At the entrance stood a statue, a warrior in grey knight armour, face hooded, sword sheathed. Its nameplate read only, First of the Lost. Drago reached out, ran a gaunteted hand across the words. They shifted under his touch. Beneath the ash, another name waited, Seraphon. Drago did not flinch. He lowered his head. And then, from within the cathedral's blackened gate, came a single word, spoken with sorrow, spoken with love. Brother. There was no sound as he stepped inside, only pressure, the kind of silence that bore weight, heavy, knowing, ancient. It clung to Drago's armor like a shroud, muffling the hum of his power pack, suppressing the steady click of his boots on stone. No dust stirred in this place, no decay claimed it. The air was sterile, as if entropy itself had been forbidden entry. Sanctuary. That was the word the signal had whispered. But this was no sanctuary. This was a tomb. The cathedral stretched in impossible dimensions, wider on the inside than the outside allowed. Every wall bore scripture in the dialect of the first, not Low Gothic, not even High Gothic, but Proto-Terran, a dead language known only to the founding members of the Grey Knights. Verses etched in silver, each a prayer for absolution, or perhaps confession. We bind what we understand. We destroy what we do not. We fear only the mirror. Drago read the words, but did not linger. To dwell here was to bleed memories, and his memories were no longer obedient. He moved deeper. The inner sanctum unfolded before him, an atrium of black marble and white fire, twin statues flanking the altar. One bore the sigil of the Inquisition, its eyes blindfolded. The other was unmarked, hooded, its hand extended in supplication. And behind the altar he saw him, Seraphon, no longer the boy of memory, no longer the heretic frozen in a final scream of betrayal. The figure before him was neither demon nor man. He stood with calm stillness, robes of grey and crimson woven with threads that shimmered as if made of void light. His face was unchanged, pale, sharp, too young for the age he bore. But his eyes, they were old, not with time, but with understanding. You came, Seraphon said. His voice was quiet, human. Drago did not answer immediately. He watched, studied, searched for lies. Am I dead then? Drago finally asked. Is this the trap, the illusion? Shall we finish the heresy you began with blood? Seraphon tilted his head. You never truly killed me, brother. You banished me, as we banish all things we fear. The silence between them deepened. I watched you fall, Drago growled. I watched the demon burst from your work. I saw the minds it consumed. Yes, because I failed. Seraphon's voice held no malice. Because I tried to shape chaos before I understood it. And you, always faithful, always wrathful. You did what you were trained to do. You ended it. You ended me. Drago's hand hovered near the hilt of his nemesis blade. You spoke with demons. I listened to the warp, Seraphon said. To the truth behind the noise. Do you think we alone are the will of the Emperor? Do you think purity is measured by ignorance? The room seemed to pulse, not with warp energy, but something more ancient, something beneath the veil. Seraphon stepped down from the altar. His gait was slow, deliberate. There was no threat in his movements, only sorrow. Do you remember the oath of the first? He asked. That we shall be the blade, unswayed by fear or doubt. That we shall guard humanity even when it does not understand its peril. I remember, Drago said, voice low. I have not broken it. Drago frowned. You sought communion with the enemy. I sought to change the enemy. No one changes the warp. Seraphon smiled, faint and weary. No one has ever tried. The silence trembled again. Drago saw the chamber now for what it truly was. Not a trap, but a seed, a nexus of impossible design. Psychic stabilizers woven into the very foundation, null wards layered beneath warp-conductive stone. The architecture was neither imperial nor Xenos, but something lost to all records. A lab, a prison, a beginning. Seraphon continued. This place, it was built by Malkador before Titan, before we were born. He saw the truth, that the warp was not simply evil, but wounded. A scar carved into reality by thought itself. What we call demons are its infection, not its intention. Blasphemy, Drago said, but the word fell limp. He had heard worse in his exile. No, Seraphon said. Hope. He extended his hand, not in challenge, but in offering. I have waited centuries for you to find this place. You, of all the knights, were the only one who saw beyond the creed. You, who walk the warp and do not break. You, who bear the Emperor's name carved upon your heart, not to destroy, but to heal. Drago did not move. Memories warred in his mind. He had seen the raw horror of the warp. He had faced the gods themselves, fought the mad tyrants of the Eye. He had carved his way through 1,000 nightmares. But never once had he healed anything. Only burned, only purged, only killed. And here, now, in the quiet between stars, his brother, long dead, long hated, offered another path. A chance not to kill the enemy, but to understand it. And Drago hesitated. That was the deepest heresy of all. You ask me to betray everything we were, he whispered. No, Seraphon said. I ask you to remember why we began. He turned, walking back toward the altar. With a whisper, the marble parted, revealing a small object resting within a sphere of stasis light. A book, bound in silver, locked with psychic seals so old they trembled at Drago's approach. The Codex Remissum, Seraphon said. The Book of Forgiveness, the last work of Malkador the Sigillite. He sealed it here when the others rejected it. They feared what it offered, a way to rewrite the warp, not through suppression, but transformation. Drago stepped forward. His hand hovered near the sphere. His mind screamed, do not touch it, do not trust him. He is dead, he is wrong. And yet, beneath all the training, beneath all the prayers, a quieter voice whispered, what if he's right? Seraphon watched him. I cannot open it, he said. It is bound to your blood. You are the last of the first, the last with the right. Drago looked into the sphere, his own reflection, stared back. Warrior, exile, killer. Not savior, not yet. He reached forward, and the seals began to stir. The seals did not break, they wept. One by one, the layered locks of the stasis field dissolved into ribbons of pale energy, drawn inward like sighs exhaled by ghosts. The air in the chamber thickened, taking on the scent of sacred oil and burned parchment. Drago reached out with both hands, his armored gauntlets reverent, almost hesitant. When his fingers touched the codex, pain lanced through his mind like a spear of memory. Visions, a throne of ash, a voice without a face, 10,000 warriors kneeling in silence, their oaths offered not to a man, but to an idea. And at the center, the sigillite, Malkador. He stood before Drago, not in flesh, but in echo, a spectral shape bound in ancient thought. His face was lined, his eyes endless. Time swam behind his gaze like a dying sun. He spoke, not aloud, but directly into Drago's soul. To save mankind, we created a lie. The chamber vanished. Only memory remained. Drago staggered, but did not release the book. He clutched it to his chest as the force of revelation hammered into him, relentless and true. We forged the Grey Knights not only to hunt demons, but to become their mirror. Not in corruption, but in understanding. We hoped, perhaps, if one could walk the warp and not fall, a bridge could be built. Scenes unfolded within his mind. A circle of robed figures, founders of the Grey Knights, arguing beneath a vault of starlight. Words spoken in rage, fear, and hope. A young Seraphim, eyes bright with faith, standing beside Malkador, reading from a scroll of forbidden runes. An early experiment, binding warp creatures not with pain or exorcism, but with empathy, with emotion, with memory. It failed. They died screaming, and the project was buried, erased from all records, but not destroyed. Drago fell to one knee, the weight of it pressed into his chest like the hand of a god. Behind him, Seraphim watched with stillness carved from grief. I tried to finish what Malkador began, he said softly. Not to control the warp, not to use it, but to speak to it in the language it once understood. Hope. Drago looked up. His voice was hoarse. And it answered. Seraphim's smile was bleak. Not in words. It answered with teeth. The silence returned. Drago stood slowly, the codex now glowing with a light that pulsed in time with his heart. It did not feel like power. It felt like memory made manifest. Within its pages lay a forgotten path, one that could reshape the Imperium, or destroy it utterly. You should have told the chapter, Drago said. They would have killed me, Seraphim replied. As you nearly did. Drago's grip tightened around the book. Then perhaps they were right. Were they? Seraphim asked. Tell me, has our endless war against chaos made the galaxy safer? Have our sacrifices built peace? Or have we only delayed the inevitable? There was no answer, because Drago had none. He had fought for centuries. He had killed demons beyond count, carved paths of ruin through the warp itself. And still, the galaxy burned. The eye of terror widened. The madness spread. Every battle won was another breath stolen from an empire dying on its knees. The truth was a wound. Then what do you want? Drago demanded. To remake the Grey Knights? To preach heresy in the halls of Titan? No, Seraphim said. I want to give you a choice. He approached, and the temperature dropped with every step, as if the warp itself recoiled from the idea of what he carried. From within his robe, he produced a shard of crystal, humming faintly with dimensional resonance. It pulsed in sync with the codex. This is the ether keystone, he said. Malkador designed it as a key, to be bound to a mind unbroken by chaos, yours. With it, the codex can be fully awakened, its knowledge unlocked. And if I refuse? Seraphim did not flinch. Then I destroy it, and all that remains of hope dies here, with us. Drago stared at the shard. His mind warred. Every instinct screamed in defiance. Every oath, every scar, every whisper of the Emperor's will told him this path led only to ruin. But his heart, what remained of it, remembered something older than the creed. Something Seraphim had never forgotten. Purpose, not vengeance, not survival. Purpose. To protect mankind, Drago whispered, from the darkness it cannot see. Seraphim nodded. Even when that darkness is inside us. There were no more words. Drago took the shard. The chamber quaked. A low hum vibrated through the floor, into his bones. The codex opened, not like a book, but like a wound in reality. Its pages unfolded not in ink, but in light and voice and memory. Images burst forth, maps of the warp restructured, sigils that bent space, echoes of thoughts spoken by beings older than time. And in the center of it all, an instruction, a ritual, one that could bind a demon not by iron or flame, but by choice. Consent. It was impossible, and it was true. Behind him, Seraphon knelt, not in worship, not in subjugation, but in recognition. "You were always stronger than me," he said. "Now I see why." Drago said nothing, because in that moment, he knew what came next. The choice was not whether to accept the Codex. The choice was what he would do with it. Keep it secret, destroy it, or carry it home to Titan, to the brothers who had never once questioned the purity of their cause. He looked down at the pages, still unfolding, still singing, and he whispered a prayer, not to the Emperor, but to the memory of the man who had shaped them all. "Malkador, what have you done?" The light dimmed, the choice remained, and the galaxy turned. Titan shimmered in orbit, cloaked behind psychic veils and solar shadows, veiled even from the light of its own system's star. A moon carved hollow and filled with secrets. It was the fortress monastery of the Grey Knights, untouchable, sacred, and alone. And yet Drago felt it more distant than ever before. The translation from the warp came not with thunder, but with silence. The strike cruiser Veritas Infractor re-entered the material realm like a ghost breaching the skin of reality. The crew, psychers, battle brothers, and techno-scribes spoke in hushed tones, aware that something had changed in their Supreme Grand Master, though none dared name it. Drago had not spoken since returning from the Black Meridian. He had not prayed, he had not slept, he had simply watched the stars, the flickering echoes of astropathic messages, the unread lines of the Codex Remissum that only he could now see. The ether keystone remained bound to his gauntlet, its crystalline light dimmed, but never extinguished. It pulsed gently, in rhythm with his twin hearts. Titan loomed ahead, growing larger. He remembered the oath chambers where he had bled, the sanctum where his name was carved in steel, the shadowed reliquaries where they kept the blades of fallen heroes, and the skulls of traitor princes slain in silence. He remembered belonging, and wondered now if he still did. The ship docked in silence. No procession awaited him, no fanfare or ritual hymn. Only Justica Malvus, clad in full Terminator plate, stood at the threshold, flanked by two paladins. His face was drawn in solemn stone. "Welcome home, Supreme Grandmaster." Drago returned the nod, but no warmth passed between them. They walked the inner halls in silence. Titan's corridors were unchanging, vaulted ceilings, banners depicting ancient battles, walls lined with prayers etched in adamantine. But Drago felt them pressing inward now, like a tomb, slowly sealing. Malvus finally broke the silence. "Your return was not expected. The Librarius had declared your presence lost to the warp again." "I returned ahead of schedule," Drago replied, "with nothing to report." Drago stopped, turned. The paladins shifted, uncertain. Tension crackled, unspoken but heavy. He regarded Malvus carefully. "What are you asking me?" The Justicar did not blink. The Prognosticars saw shadows near the Black Meridian, fractured futures, a presence that escaped divination. "And now you return, alone." A long pause. "Did you find Seraphon?" The name hung in the air like ash. Drago answered slowly, carefully. "Yes." "And he is dead." Truth, as always, was a matter of framing. Malvus gave no reaction. His face betrayed no suspicion, but neither did it show relief. "Then the matter is closed," he said, though the words felt hollow. But it wasn't closed, not for Drago. He could still feel the Codex beneath his cloak. Bound in stasis fields, even the tech adepts of Mars would struggle to understand. It weighed more than its mass. It meant more than its words. And it was burning a hole through his conscience. As they entered the Grand Librarium, Drago's stride slowed. He gazed at the statue of Janus, founder of the Grey Knights, carved in white stone and gold, a relic of forgotten trust. Janus had been a weapon built by Malcador, a knight forged from ruin, an immortal soul tempered by faith and sealed in silence. Was Drago now any different? Inside the librarium, psychic energies hummed. Rows of vaults pulsed with light. Runes danced along shelves that could kill the uninitiated. Here, the minds of the Grey Knights gathered, and here, Drago would have to decide. He approached the central chamber, where the librarians convened. Their eyes turned toward him, blazing, questioning. "You bear something," intoned Brother Codice Tevros. "We feel it." "A relic," Drago answered, "from Seraphan's fortress." He pulled the codex from his cloak and placed it upon the central plinth. Immediately, the room changed. The air thickened, lights dimmed. One of the librarians took a step back. Even with its energy suppressed, the codex sang, low, grieving, hungry. It was a book, and it was not. It was a thought made solid. A wound wrapped in words. It carried not knowledge, but memory, of failure, of intent, of beginnings no one remembered asking for. "This is not of our order," said Tevros, voice tight. "It is," Drago said quietly. "Just forgotten." Silence followed. One of the younger librarians, Thalos, spoke next. "What is within it?" Drago hesitated. He could lie. He could say it was a failed experiment, that it was warp-tainted and dangerous. He could consign it to the flames beneath Titan, where forbidden law was cast and sanctified by annihilation. He could protect the Grey Knights from the truth. But that, too, was a kind of betrayal. "It holds the designs of Malcador himself," Drago said. "A path not taken, a method of understanding chaos, rather than merely destroying it." Shock rippled across the chamber. One librarian uttered a prayer. Another turned away. "Heretical," someone whispered. Tevros's voice came as iron. "You would bring this poison to Titan. You, who have walked the warp alone, speak now of understanding." Drago stepped forward, no longer uncertain. "We were never meant to be destroyers alone. We were created to end the war, not prolong it." "And at what cost?" Tevros spat. "Our purity, our souls. What makes us Grey Knights would be lost." "Then perhaps," Drago said, "what makes us Grey Knights is not enough." The words stunned the room. Not shouted, not defiant, grieving. Tevros stared at him, and for a long time said nothing. Finally, "You are not yourself. I am more myself than I have ever been." The librarians could not agree. They would argue, debate, petition the chapter master. Some would demand the codex be destroyed. Others, perhaps quietly, would read it. But none could unhear what Drago had said. He turned and left them with the codex. As he returned to his quarters, the stars beyond Titan's veil shimmered. He knew now what the codex meant. Not a weapon, not a cure, a test of the soul of the Grey Knights, of his own, and of the Imperium that had forgotten why it fought. The walls of Titan remembered everything. In their silence, they held the echoes of 10,000 rituals, the screams of demons banished to the void, and the prayers of warriors who had never doubted, until now. It began as a whisper. The Codex Remissum, secured beneath vault lock and psychic warding, did not speak in mortal tongues. Yet those attuned to the warp began to feel it, a pressure behind the eyes, a tingle at the edge of thoughts. Not a voice, but a pull. Librarians grew restless in meditation. Prognosticators faltered in their visions. The codex was unread, yet it was already known. Drago stood in the Hall of Echoes, where the names of every fallen grey knight were carved into obsidian walls, each name lit by a thin band of starlight from the oculus above. He read them in silence. Hundreds, thousands, men who had died untainted, their names preserved forever in purity. But not all truths could be carved. They think you've been corrupted. The voice was gentle and familiar. Chaplain Gaius Iram, his armour black as voidstone, his Crozius dormant by his side. His face, framed by battle scars and age, bore a mournful calm. He had trained half the order in rites of purity. He had buried more than any. "To you?" Gaius said nothing. They stood together a long while, watching the slow drift of motes through the beam of light. "They say the Codex sings," Gaius murmured. "I can't hear it, but the young ones can. It frightens them." "It should," Drago said. "Fear reminds them they are still mortal. And if it corrupts, then we were never as strong as we claimed." Gaius sighed. "You've changed, Kaldor, since the warp. You would not understand. Try me." Drago turned. The weight of centuries burned behind his eyes. "The warp is not chaos alone. It is truth, Gaius. Raw and unforgiving. It does not lie. It reflects. It showed me the Imperium for what it is, and us for what we are. Knights, weapons, blunt instruments wielded by a blind hand. We fight demons with hate and hope it is enough. But the warp does not fear hate. It feeds on it. So what then? Understanding? Peace with the warp?" "No," Drago said, voice hardening. "Understanding is not surrender. It is preparation." Gaius regarded him with ancient sorrow. "And if it costs us everything we are, then perhaps what we are is not enough." Silence again. Then the chaplain nodded once, solemnly. "I will not condemn you, but others will." He left with the same grace he always carried, quiet, firm, heavy with truth. In the lower sanctums, beneath the Hall of Blades, the fractures began. Some came to Drago in secret. Not many, not loudly, but enough. Brother librarian Ephron, pale and gaunt, whispered of dreams that mirrored the Codex's verses before they were ever read. Justica Elion, stoic and unyielding, confessed that he had stood before the Codex and felt his own name written within its pages. And Brother Apothecary Valen, who had seen too many brothers lost to madness in the Eye of Terror, asked the question Drago had long feared. If we cannot understand chaos, how can we cure it? None of them openly swore allegiance to the Codex. None dared. But the seed was planted, the idea. And that, more than any demon, was what the Grey Knights truly feared. Meanwhile, the resistance grew. Tevros and the senior librarians issued warnings. A formal conclave was called. Rare, dangerous, and utterly final. The Codex would be reviewed, its fate decided, its bearer judged. Drago did not attend. Instead, he walked the path of sorrows, an ancient passage beneath the surface of Titan, a pilgrimage carved through the roots of the moon, its walls inscribed with psychic scars left by the original founders. Each step hummed with centuries of pain. Here, the first Grey Knights had wept, not in weakness, but in clarity. They had understood that they were not gods, just men, trained to stand where no others could, and to pay the price for doing so. At the end of the path stood a mirror, not glass, but psychic memory, polished by rites and blood, a relic from Malcador's time. It showed not reflection, but revelation. Drago stepped forward and saw himself, not in armor, but in fragments, shards of memory. Each version of him, young knight, rising Justica, lost wanderer of the warp, bitter veteran. Each fragment stared back. He saw Seraphan, laughing once, before he fell. He saw Makar smiling even as he died, and behind them all he saw Malkador. "You are the knife," said the echo, "but not the hand." Drago spoke aloud. "Then what am I? The hand has forgotten the knife, and the knife now dreams of shaping." The light faded. He fell to his knees, not in despair, in decision. When the conclave met again, Drago returned, not in defiance, but in silence. He carried no weapon, only the codex. He placed it upon the dais. Tevros stood ready, backed by high librarians, scribes, and purity singers. "You stand accused," Tevros declared, "of bringing into our fortress a heretical text. I do not deny it." The room froze. "I do not deny that it is dangerous, nor do I claim to understand it." He looked at them all, each face etched with fear, doubt, and ancient pride. "But I have seen the future, and if we do not change, we will lose. Not in battle, but in meaning. We will become hollow, righteousness without reason, purity without purpose." "You speak treason," Tevros hissed. "No," Drago said, voice steady. "I speak truth, and I will carry it alone if I must." Then he turned to go, not banished, not exiled, but separate, again, and none stopped him. He returned to the Veritas Infracta alone. The Codex remained behind, locked, studied, feared. He had planted the seed. Now it would either take root or be burned. He stared out the viewport as Titan vanished behind a veil of shadow. "You were right, Seraphon," he whispered. "They are not ready." And then he spoke the ship into the warp. The warp was not a place. It was not even a state of being. It was hunger made realm, emotion made storm, endless, formless, yet seductively familiar. And into that maelstrom the Veritas Infracta sailed, its prow alight with psychic wards that shimmered like oil on water. Drago stood at the helm, still as iron, his armor unadorned, his helm clutched at his side. He had not spoken since Titan, not even to himself. The silence was not peace, it was waiting. Ahead the warp roiled in agonized hues, a blood wound of space. Time bled sideways, stars screamed, and within the storm a signal pulsed. It was faint, fractured, a cry torn through unreality, a distress call. Plus blav spl. Astra telepathica signal fragment. Plus blav spl. Grey Knight detachment. Under siege. Segmentum obscurus. World designation. Garthis Primus. Demonic incursion confirmed. Request. Purification strike. Plus pul plus plus. End fragment. Half pul pul. Drago knew the name. Garthis Primus. A former shrine world, half consumed during the Great Rift's first shuddering birth. A world left unhealed, too dangerous to reclaim, too sacred to destroy. That a Grey Knight detachment had returned to it meant something had been uncovered, or unleashed. He closed his eyes, and the warp whispered a name. Makar. It was not possible. He had slain the demon prince with his own hands. He had carved his name into the creature's dying soul. He had bound it in agony. He had watched it fade into nothingness. And yet, the warp remembers all things, even vengeance. Garthis Primus was broken long before Drago arrived. The world hung shattered, its crust cracked like a dried husk, ringed by skeletal spires that once served as cathedrals. Now, those towers wept warp fire and screamed with voices long dead. The skies were ink black, the clouds lit from below by an unseen, unnatural sun. The Veritas broke through the veil like a spear, and Drago descended alone. There was no need for an army, no soul would be spared here. Only silence greeted him on the surface, but it was wrong, too perfect, too absolute. The kind of silence that watched. He followed the path of ruin, craters formed by bombardment, bolter casings thick as snow, scorched sigils of warding long since broken. He found their bodies first. The Grey Knights had made a last stand. Armour scarred with warp burns, psychic hoods shattered, hands still clutching storm bolters. Every man had died with his back to another, encircled, cut down together, all save one. A trail of deep footprints, irregular and staggering, led away from the battlefield, deeper into the ruins. He followed it without hesitation, and found the survivor, Brother Captain Lysandros, or what remained. The man knelt in the nave of a collapsed chapel. His armour was cracked and steaming, his flesh withered beneath the plate. His face was pale, eyes rimmed in black. He did not look up when Drygo approached. "You should not have come," Lysandros rasped. "You sent the call." "No, I tried to die before I could." Drygo knelt. "What happened?" Lysandros smiled, lips cracked. "We followed the trace, like good soldiers. Thought we found a tether to something ancient, something banished. The Codex helped us locate it." The Codex. Even here its influence had reached. "We thought it was a prison," Lysandros went on. "But it was a seed. It called to the warp, drew Makar back to the wound." Drygo's heart stilled. "He's here. Not fully, not yet, but close. Too close. He's learning to become more than he was." The captain coughed, a dry, scraping sound. "He doesn't seek to rule now. He seeks to understand us, the ones who defy him. He asked me to explain. I refused." "And he let you live?" "No," Lysandros said, smiling through blood. "He let me suffer." A long silence stretched between them. Then Drygo spoke. "You have done your duty." "No," Lysandros whispered, shaking his head. "My duty is not yet done." He extended his hand. In his palm was a shard of something ancient, glass-like, humming faintly. "This is part of the anchor, the ward that held him. We broke it. Then I will restore it." "No," Lysandros said. "You must destroy the rest. You must finish what we failed." His fingers closed weakly around Drygo's gauntlet. "Promise me." "I promise." And with that, the captain's light flickered, then died. Drygo stood alone in the shadow of the broken chapel. But he was not afraid. He could feel Makar now. Not as an enemy, but as a presence. A shadow that smiled from every crack, that tasted every memory, that remembered death and wanted more. "Kaldor Drygo," the voice coiled through the dust. "My murderer, my mirror." Drygo did not flinch. "You are not yet whole." "But I am rising," Makar said, laughter woven into every syllable. "The Codex showed you the edge. Let me show you the fall." "You think to corrupt me?" "No," Makar whispered, "to complete you." The voice faded, and in its place, a scream, high and inhuman, rose from the horizon. The second anchor was breaking. Time was short. Drygo turned toward the dark. His mission was no longer survival. It was conclusion. He would end this, whatever it took. And in the silence behind him, the chapel crumbled, as if mourning. The surface of Garthis Primus was ash and silence, but beneath it, something pulsed. Drygo moved through the fissure Lysandros had died defending, a cracked vein in the earth that spiraled downward into firelit shadow. The stone whispered as he passed, not words, remnants, echoes. "Drygo." A child's voice. "My lord." A brother's voice. "You failed." His own voice. None of it real, all of it remembered. The deeper he walked, the more the world lost shape. Time bent around him. Ruins folded into impossible angles. Statues of saints wept blood that ran upward into the air and vanished like mist. Candles burned with ice-blue flame, suspended mid-flicker as though caught between seconds. It was not the warp. It was worse. It was a hybrid, a fracture, born of a demon's will and mortal faith made toxic. "What are you?" Drago whispered, not expecting an answer. But the answer came. A mirror. The voice rose from everywhere. The stone, the air, the dust. A reflection of what you do not face. A culmination of what you deny. Drago stopped before a great archway half buried in obsidian slag. Upon its surface were carved the names of every grey knight ever slain on this world. A monument or a tomb. The doors parted without touch. He entered. Within, the cradle of the anchor awaited. It was a hall the size of a cathedral, yet sunken far beneath the surface. At its centre, 3 great pylons rose, woven with silver-veined crystal and humming with restrained energy. 2 were shattered. The third flickered. On the walls, frescoes flickered with psychic memory. Visions of the demon bound by the first generation of Grey Knights, long before even Drago's time. A sacrifice made in blood and mind and soul to hold Makar in stasis. Drago approached the last pylon. It trembled beneath his gaze. There, embedded in its core, pulsed the final anchor shard, the last seal. But the energy binding it had begun to decay. The Codex had provided coordinates to this place. Had that knowledge been blessing or a trap? "You begin to understand," the voice whispered. "You are not a warrior. You are a key." The shadows around the chamber lengthened, moving even as the light stood still. From the far side, a figure stepped forward. It wore grey knight armor, but it was wrong. The plates were twisted. The purity seals hung shredded, scorched black. The helm was gone, revealing a face Drago knew, his own, but ruined. A mouth full of jagged teeth, eyes bleeding light. "I am your possibility," it said. "No," Drago replied. "You are a lie." "Am I?" The figure stepped closer. "I have your strength, your certainty, but not your hesitation. I chose the path of power. You chose the path of chains. I chose duty. And yet you still carry the demon's name in your soul," the reflection said. "You etched it into the warp. You thought it would bind me, but it feeds me." It raised its blade, a mockery of the Titan sword, and the battle began. They moved with mirrored grace. Each strike anticipated, each feint countered. Sparks lit the cathedral chamber like stars. But where Drago fought, with discipline, the reflection fought with fury. He was faster, stronger, and Drago felt it, the fatigue not of body, but of spirit, the doubt that gnawed beneath the surface, the truth he had never spoken aloud. He was tired of an endless crusade, of victories undone by time, of evil reborn again and again. For every demon he slew, another rose. For every world saved, 10 more slipped into shadow. And the reflection whispered, "You could end it all. No more wandering, no more sacrifice, no more exile. And become you. Become what you must." The false Drago lunged, and Drago fell. The Titan's sword slipped from his grasp, sliding across the stone. The reflection raised its weapon. But in that moment, Drago did not reach for his sword. He reached inward, to memory, to Lysandros dying in the chapel, to the silence of Titan, to Malkador's voice, to faith. Not blind faith in symbols or structures, but faith in why he had chosen this path, why he had refused to become something like Makar. "I am not perfect," Drago said aloud, "but I choose to be bound." He closed his eyes and drew in the warp, not with violence, but with clarity, the purity of will, of sacrifice. The reflection screamed and burst into ash. When Drago rose, the chamber was still again, but the final anchor cracked. Time around him stuttered. Makar's voice whispered, "You delay the inevitable." Perhaps, Drago replied. He approached the pylon and placed the shard from Lysandros into the structure. Light blazed. For a moment, the anchors aligned. The prison reasserted. Makar roared, not in rage, but in amusement. You have not won. You have only chosen another ending. The sound vanished, and Gathis Primus fell silent. For now. Drago emerged from the ruins as the sun, or something like it, rose above the world's edge. Ash blew across the surface. The Veritas awaited him. He paused once and looked back, not to the ruins, but to the possibility he had slain. He would carry the wound of that confrontation forever, but not the guilt. There was strength in sacrifice, even if no one remembered it, even if it cost him everything. And above, in the void, the warp twisted with silent interest, waiting, always waiting. Titan. The fortress moon loomed above Saturn's grey rings, swathed in celestial silence. An immortal bastion wrapped in layers of void shields, sacred wards, and the weight of millennia. And yet, as the Veritas descended through the thick shroud of storms and psychic interference, Kaldor Drago felt it. An unease beneath the ritual calm, a subtle dissonance in the song of the Brotherhood. He had not returned here in decades, not truly. Every time he crossed the veil of reality to walk upon its sanctified stone, something of him remained adrift. His exile never fully lifted, his presence tolerated but never fully welcomed. He was both hero and heretic, champion and curse. The librarians never said it aloud, but he could see it in their eyes. He had gone where no knight was meant to tread, and returned changed. The gates of the citadel opened for him with due ceremony. Rows of silver-armoured knights stood in ceremonial silence, halberds crossed in salute. At their centre stood Grandmaster Alaric, one of the few who remembered Drago as more than a legend. His voice was cold, measured. Lord Drago, we did not expect your return. I did not come for courtesy, Drago replied. The Codex is compromised. A flicker behind Alaric's eyes. Just a moment, just enough. He already knew. The High Conclave convened in the Librarium Oculus, a cathedral of crystalline shelves that held the soul of the chapter's collective memory. They came robed in shadow and thought, Grand Masters, Laura Wardens, High Exorcists. The psychic weight of their presence pressed like ocean tides against the mind. Even Drago felt its pressure. He had once stood among them. Now he stood before them. The Codex is poisoned, he said. The coordinates it provided on Gathis Primus led to a trap. Makar's influence has reached its edges. Murmurs spread. None denied it. None could. And yet you sealed the demon once more, Alaric said. Did you not? At cost. Drago's eyes swept the assembled faces. Some he knew, some he did not. But among them he sensed something far worse than dissent. The Codex is not just poisoned, it's self-writing. The room stilled, a single breath passed, then another, and the truth, long buried, began to uncoil. The Codex was never static, said Laura Warden Sorrel. An old knight, cloaked in the blue flames of perpetual warding. It was designed to evolve, to adapt. We thought we controlled its growth, another said. We didn't realize it could be guided. Guided by what? Drago asked. By faith, by fear, by whatever echoes remain of those we lose, Sorrel whispered. The Codex is psychic parchment. Every death leaves an imprint, every war a scar. It is as alive as we are. And in that moment, the truth became unbearable. For centuries, the Codex had been both guide and scripture. Its accuracy had saved worlds. But what if that precision was not divine? What if it was design? Makar's design. Drago stepped forward. You've known this. Sorrel looked away. We suspected. And you kept using it, because without it we are blind. Then we were never free. It was not rage Drygo felt, not betrayal. It was confirmation. The slow poison that had seeped into everything. The same poison that had cost Lysandros his life. The same voice he had fought on Garthis Primus. Not just a demon, but a thought, an idea, and ideas could never die. The Codex cannot be purged, Alaric said, but we may yet bend it back to the light. You are speaking of communion, Drago said darkly. You want to speak to it, bargain with it. We must understand it. You cannot understand a demon, Drago snapped. You can only contain it. There was silence, and then another voice, soft, venomous, slid into the chamber. Then perhaps it is you, Lord Drago, who has lost perspective. Drago turned. From the far end of the chamber stepped a knight he did not know, clad not in the sigils of purity, but in an armor too polished, too perfect, a face too smooth, eyes too still. He wore the badge of librarian. But Drago saw the truth in the flicker of his aura. Who are you? A servant of the Codex, the knight said, and a seeker of order. You are its relic, its ruin. The Codex has evolved. Perhaps it is you who must be rewritten. The psychic assault came with no warning. 1,000 thoughts screamed into Drago's mind. His failures, the face of Makar, the death of his brothers, the warp, the exile. He fell to one knee, and then rose, not with fury, with certainty. You are no knight, Drago said. You are the echo made flesh, the ghost of the Codex, a demon made word. The false librarian smiled. And you are already within me. The chamber erupted. Flames, wards, psychic shields. Grand Masters screamed oaths. Halberds clashed against force blades. But Drago saw only one enemy. He moved, sword drawn, not to slay, to cut away the illusion. One blow, a perfect stroke, and the false knight shattered. Into ash, into thought, into a whisper. But the damage was done. The Codex had created a vessel, a fragment of Makar, and it had walked among them. After the fire, after the cleansing rites, Drago stood at the base of the librarium steps. Alaric approached him, his armor scorched. You were right. Too late, Drago said. The Codex must be sealed. Not sealed, Drago replied. Destroyed. Alaric hesitated. Do you know what you're saying? Everything we are comes from it. Then everything we are must be rebuilt. For a long time, Alaric said nothing. Then he nodded. Just once. So be it. Later, alone in his cell, Drago opened the last page of the Codex, blank, waiting. He lifted his blade and carved 3 words, not by fate, then closed it. Outside, the moons of Saturn turned in silence. But Titan had changed. The Grey Knights had changed. And somewhere in the warp, Makar laughed, not in defeat, but in promise. Because the war had never been one of flesh. It had always been one of meaning. It began in silence. Not the silence of reverence or meditation, but the cold, calculated stillness before the knife is drawn in the dark. Since the revelation of the Codex's corruption, Titan had become a world divided, not by banners, but by belief. Some saw the Codex as flawed, but salvageable. Others viewed it as a sacred relic desecrated by time and war. A few, those closest to Drago, saw it for what it had become, a cage of prophecy, a demon's mouthpiece, a mirror that reflected only what it wished them to see. The Codex was no longer merely a guide. It was a weapon, and it had been turned inward. The fire began in the Hall of Binding. A librarian, young, brilliant, too curious, attempted to commune with the Codex's core. What emerged from the psychic rift was not knowledge, but echoing madness. War flame bled through marble, sigils cracked, the protective wards etched by generations turned against their makers. By the time the flames were extinguished, 12 knights lay dead, burned from within, their minds hollowed by something just beyond human comprehension. And Drago knew. The Codex was defending itself. The conclave splintered within days. Alaric did what he could to hold the order together, but words no longer reached where fear had taken root. One faction, led by Purifier Captain Veren, demanded immediate containment and dismantling of the Codex, to preserve purity, to honor the fallen. Another, under the control of Chaplain Knight Kareth, insisted the Codex could be healed, that its flaws were reflections of their own weakness, not external corruption. They began to wear different sigils, pray in separate chapels, train with wary eyes on their brothers. Titan had become a fortress of ghosts and growing doubt, and Drago, its most cursed son, walked its halls like an omen. He met with Alaric in the Trisagian vaults, where the first names of the Grey Knights were carved, each one a monument to sacrifice. "You cannot stop this," Drago said. "The split is already upon us." "They look to you," Alaric replied. "They fear you, but they listen." Drago said nothing, because he had seen this before, on a distant world where brother had turned on brother, where ambition and fear had worn the masks of duty. He remembered the first rift in the word-bearers, the slow, proud unravelling of the Loon Wolves. He had walked in that echo before, and now, once again, history opened its throat for the blade. "We cannot be divided," Alaric said. "Not now, not when the warp grows louder with every breath." "Then let them choose." "You mean civil war?" "No," Drago said. "I mean truth." It was during the ceremony of veils, an ancient rite meant to affirm unity, that the fracture became a wound. Each brother was to anoint their blade in the flame of purity. But when Veren stepped forward, he drew not flame, but blood. He cast his anointed halberd at the foot of Chaplain Kareth and declared, "You have already broken the vow. The Codex is a whispering tomb, and you kneel before it." Kareth, ever calm, replied, "And you follow a sword without a soul." The clash erupted within heartbeats. Steel met steel in sacred halls. Psychic energy blistered through the sanctum. Brother fought brother, not with hatred, but with certainty. Not for vengeance, but for what they believed was salvation. Drago watched from above. He did not intervene, because he understood now. This was not war. This was revelation. The Codex had always been more than a book. It was a lens through which they viewed the universe, and now that lens had shattered. What each knight saw in its remains was a reflection of their truest self. Some saw order, others saw betrayal, few saw freedom. After the smoke cleared, the order was no longer whole. Veren's purifiers took exile, renouncing the Codex, pledging allegiance only to the Oath Eternal, the vow to hunt the demon wherever it lay, without prophecy or predestination. Kareth's followers remained, their faith now fervor. They believed the Codex had passed judgment, that those who left were the heretics, and that the cleansing had only begun. And in the middle stood Drago, between fire and shadow, neither leader nor rebel, just a man too old for hope and too cursed for peace. He stood at the gate as Veren prepared to depart Titan with 50 knights. "Where will you go?" Drago asked. "Where the Codex no longer sees," Veren said. "There are truths out there, things older than demons, perhaps even older than the warp. And when you find them, we'll decide what we become. You may never return. Varen placed a hand on Drygo's shoulder. Neither will you. When their ships vanished into the warp, Drygo did not watch them leave. He walked to the sanctum where the codex had been sealed in stasis. The vault was lined with sessile steel and runes that groaned under his presence. He approached the book, silent now, dormant, but he could feel it watching, waiting. He placed his palm against its cover. I see you. For a moment, the codex whispered. Not words, not temptation, just a single quiet thought. You are already mine. Drago smiled. Then you've already lost, and turned away. Far beyond Titan, in the dark between stars, something old stirred. A black citadel orbiting a dead sun. No light, no gravity, only memory. And there, in chains of psychic fire, something awoke. A thing once called Makar. It opened its eyes and whispered a name, not Drago's, but another. One forgotten in all records, erased from the codex, buried by the Brotherhood, and now returning. Not as a savior, but as the final weapon. There are names that do not die, not because they are remembered, but because they are feared. Deep beneath the librarium vaults of Titan, there exists a chamber without designation, wrapped in silence wards so old, they predate even the first Grand Master. It is not marked on any star chart, not referenced in any rite or litany. The chamber is carved in pre-imperial stone. Its geometry is wrong, its shape constantly shifting just beyond perception. It is called by no name, but once it held a man. Once it held Valen Routh, the unspoken, the first traitor of the Grey Knights. Valen Routh was once a librarian of unmatched clarity, a prodigy of psychic discipline. He walked among the first who stepped onto Titan's ash, planes after its founding. He spoke the original names of the demon Primarchs in full and did not falter. Some whispered he could walk in the warp without a tether, that he spoke not to the immaterium, but through it. But Routh saw too deeply. Where others saw corruption, he saw order, not peace, not harmony, but a dark and ancient equilibrium. He did not turn to chaos. He studied it, and then, in time, shaped it. They said he vanished. They said the Inquisition erased all records. They said he was a myth. They were wrong. Now, in the hollow of a dead star, Valen Routh returns. Bound in flesh, yes, but not quite living. His armor, cracked and scorched, bears no sigils, no honor. His helm is a bare faceplate of obsidian, carved in the shape of a weeping angel. Behind him, in absolute silence, marches a host of 50 warriors, former Grey Knights, long lost in the warp, forgotten, abandoned. They do not speak. They do not bleed. They carry weapons forged from nullstone and warp iron. Their purity seals burn black, and they call themselves the Veiled, not fallen, not demonic, but beyond both. In the heart of his citadel, Routh stands before a great structure, an orrery of souls, revolving in loops of agony and light. Demons are bound inside it, whispering truths they are forced to repeat for eternity. Their screams form chants. Their pain forms insight. The Codex was always a lie, Routh murmurs, not because it failed, but because it was never finished. He gazes at the construct, a psychic archive of pain and memory, and then, with a gesture, opens a rift. He is going home. On Titan, the sky breaks. Not metaphorically, literally. A seam opens above the Keep of the Flame, where the heavens fracture like glass, and a beam of cold, colourless light spears through the atmosphere. It hums with something ancient, older than chaos, older than mankind's dominion. The Veiled descend without engines. They fall like spears trailing no flame. Where they land, Silence follows. Not death, not destruction, just absence, like history being unwritten in real time. Inside the sanctum, Drygo feels it before the alarms even sound. A pressure behind the eyes, a pulling of memory. His name, whispered not in malice, but in recognition. He's come, Drygo says. Alaric, bloodied and still recovering from the schism, looks up from the Vox scrolls. Makar? No. Another demon? No. Then what? Drygo closes his eyes. A brother. We have no brothers left. That's why he's here. Valen Routh walks the halls of Titan without resistance. Wards crumble before him, not by violence, but by consent. The very stone recognizes his aura. The runes flicker, uncertain. The statues of fallen heroes seem to turn away. He enters the Hall of Echoes, the sacred place where fallen grey knights are remembered, and breathes it in like returning to a childhood home. Then he speaks aloud. You have forgotten me, but I have remembered everything. At the same moment, a psychic wave lashes across the planet. Librarians scream and drop to their knees. The codex pulses in its vault, runes bleeding smoke, and from the fractures in its bindings, the image of Routh begins to form. He is not demonic, but neither is he human. He is thought made weapon, a paradox given form. And in every Grey Knight's mind, a voice says, I was the first, I will be the last. Drago meets Routh at the threshold of the Chapel of Dawn. They do not draw weapons, not yet. You should not exist, Drago says. Neither should you, Routh replies. I was cursed. I was chosen. You turned away from the Emperor. I turned toward truth. You betrayed everything. I did what the Codex could not. The pause between them is 1,000 years long. I ended the war inside myself. At what cost? At no cost, Routh says, stepping forward. Because I discovered the final revelation. Which is, demonhood is not the end. It is the beginning. The Grey Knights mobilize. The remaining loyalists, fractured and few, rally under Alaric and Chaplain Kareth. Purifiers scattered across the void receive distress signals carved into thought code. Drago sends no call. He knows many will not answer. This is not just a battle, it is a reckoning. Titan will not survive the return of Valen Routh unchanged. And in the dark between thought and prophecy, something deeper begins to awaken. Not a demon, not a god, but a memory older than the Codex, buried in the warp storm of history itself. Something that once stood beside the Emperor and chose to walk away. War is not always declared. Sometimes it simply begins. When Valen Routh stepped onto the sanctified grounds of Titan, he did not come as a warlord, nor as a demon prince, nor even as a rebel. He came as truth, shaped, sharpened, and silent. And the most dangerous truths are not shouted, they are whispered. In the first hours of the siege, there was no fighting, no thunder of bolters, no screams of the dying. Instead, the psychic noosphere rippled like a disturbed lake. Every librarian, every warrior with the barest scrap of psychic sense felt it, something subtle moving in their minds. Memories not their own, secrets long buried surfacing like corpses in thawing ice. A voice in the dark, a thought in a dream. What if everything you killed for was a lie? Some resisted, some wept, some listened. Drago stood alone in the Hall of Blades, his sword unsheathed and burning softly in the candlelight. The storm above Titan had darkened the sky to a bruised black, and the moons hung low, watchful, silent. In front of him lay the Codex Daemonica, now partially opened by forces beyond any sanction. The words inside had changed, not erased, rewritten. Routh's mark was in every line, surgical, elegant, undeniable. His additions were not heresy. Worse, they were true. He's not corrupting them, Alaric said, entering the chamber. He's convincing them. He knows where we are weak, Drago replied. He knows the fractures. He made them. He believes what he says. That makes him more dangerous than any demon. The silence hung between them, heavy as gravestones. And the others? Drago asked. Dozens have defected. Entire squads gone. Not to chaos. Not to rebellion. To him, yes. On the western flank of Titan, at the Obsidian Cliffs, Grandmaster Mathon stood with his paladins, his armour dulled from battle, his voice hoarse from hours of chanting purity litanies. A veteran of 10 Black Crusades, he had stood against the hosts of Abaddon, shattered the claws of the bloodthirster Kagath, and watched planets die in fire. But now, as the Veiled approached, silent, unmarked, perfect, he faltered. They did not charge. They did not threaten. They merely walked, like brothers returning home. And when they met his line, they did not raise their weapons. They simply knelt. Then, one by one, they removed their helms. Faces known, faces dead. We are not traitors, one said. We are the answer. We are not the end, said another. We are what comes after the end. And in that moment, half of Mathon's company lowered their weapons. Some dropped to their knees. Others turned their guns on their own. The first blood was drawn in silence. Valen Routh moved through Titan like a shadow of its past. He touched the old libraries with reverence. He walked through the training halls where he once fought beside Malcador's chosen. He did not defile. He remembered. At the peak of the Spire of Oaths, he met Chaplain Kareth. The chaplain had nailed purity seals across his heartplate. His skull helm was etched with burn marks from psychic warding rites. He held his Crozius in one hand, and in the other the Book of Names, listing every fallen knight since the founding. You dishonor the dead, Kareth said. No, Routh replied. I complete them. You speak in riddles, because you are afraid of answers. What did you find, Routh? Kareth demanded. What truth was worth all this? Routh stepped forward, and for the first time his voice rose, not with wrath, but grief. That the Emperor's design was never pure. That chaos is not our enemy, but our mirror. That to understand it, to become more than it, we had to become something else. And you all refused. We refused because we were loyal. No, Routh said, voice like breaking stone. You were afraid. Their duel was not fought with blades. It was fought with memory. Wrath unleashed visions into Kareth's mind, visions of old conclaves, where the Grey Knights debated purity versus purpose, arguments buried beneath mountains of silence, secrets smothered in the name of peace. Kareth screamed, not in pain, but in recognition. You were right, he whispered, and that's why you had to be erased. And now, Routh asked. Kareth looked at him, then dropped his Crozius. Now I ask forgiveness. Routh embraced him, and when they parted, the Book of Names burned in blue flame, its names rewritten by will alone. Below, in the command sanctum, Drago stared at the battle displays. They meant nothing. Lines of engagement had broken down. Squads folded into routes veiled with little resistance. Not out of defeat, out of acceptance. The war was no longer about survival. It was about belief. We can still win, Alaric said beside him. We have enough men. Do we? Drago whispered. You're not seriously... I do not know any more. Alaric slammed his gauntlet against the console. He's wrong, Kaldor. He has to be. If he's not, then what are we? Drago didn't answer, because deep inside, a part of him already knew. He had walked in the warp longer than any man, fought demons in their own palaces, carved purity into the flesh of lies. And yet, Roth's presence felt familiar, not like an enemy, like a wound that had never truly closed. That night, the Spire of Light cracked. Its wards were the oldest on Titan, carved by Malkador himself. And yet, they failed. Routh stood beneath it, arms open, whispering the true name of the warp, not as weapon, but as wisdom. The Veiled surrounded him in a perfect circle. The ground pulsed beneath them. The rite had begun, not to summon a demon, not to destroy a world, but to rewrite a legacy. The Emperor failed because he feared truth, Routh whispered. We shall not. The sky above Titan opened into something else. Not warp, not real space, but a new shape of belief. One never spoken, never dared, until now. Drago descended the Spire of Light alone. No honor guard, no banners, no chance of war. The halls were silent now, as if Titan itself was holding its breath. Around him, the fortress monastery had changed, not physically, but spiritually. Wards flickered. Statues of saints wept not blood, but salt. The air tasted of memory, bitter and sweet. It was not chaos that had entered. It was revelation, and he hated it. He found Routh waiting at the base of the spire, in the Hall of Echoes, where every Grand Master had once spoken their oath. The chamber was ringed by psychic glyphs older than words, humming with the ghosts of vows long broken. Routh stood unarmed, clad in armor that shimmered like liquid dusk. Behind him, the Veiled waited in silence, but they did not advance. This was not their battle. This was his. Drago stepped forward, his Terminator armor whirring, silver white and ancient. The Titan sword gleamed in his grip, its edge hungry, sanctified by 1,000 demon deaths. I should kill you where you stand, Drago said. Routh bowed his head. You could. You deserve it. Perhaps. Silence. Long. Heavy. But will it change? Anything? Routh asked softly. Drago raised the blade. You betrayed everything we swore to protect. I fulfilled what we refused to understand. You turned knights against each other. No, Routh said. I showed them what they already knew. You speak in riddles, like the warp. And yet you've lived in the warp longer than any of us. Routh took a step forward. How many demons did you slay in their palaces? How many visions did you silence? How many truths did you choose not to hear, Kaldor? The name hit like a blade. Do not speak to me as if you know me. I am you. Drago hesitated, and in that moment, Routh walked into range. We were made in the same fire, sharpened by the same silence. The difference is, I stopped pretending. You fell. No, Routh said, voice trembling. I stood. For the first time in my life, I stood and said, this is not purity. This is fear wearing armor. Drago lunged. Their blades met. Drago's Titan sword against Routh's conjured arc blade. A shimmer of willpower and raw thought. The ground cracked. Statues exploded from the psychic pressure. Dust rose in a choking storm. They were not just fighting with weapons. They were fighting with memory. Every strike carried images, training duels on Luna, the siege of Rax, the whispering tunnels of the Black Library. Moments when they fought side by side. Moments that never happened, because one of them had been erased. I remember you, Drago roared. I remember what we did together. Why did you do this? Because you forgot me. You were condemned. I was buried, because the truth I saw would have shattered the order. They clashed again. Flesh tore. Ceramite screamed. and in every blow another fracture opened, not in their armor, but in their conviction. Far above, on the battlements, Alaric watched the storm twist into new shapes. The veiled did not move. They watched the duel like monks at a sermon, heads bowed. Some wept, not for sorrow, but for recognition. He was right, whispered one librarian. Was, said another. Still is. Alaric turned to them. You would forsake our vows? Our vows, one snapped. Or our chains? Alaric raised his bolter, but his hand shook, because he too had seen the Codex Daemonicus rewritten pages, and a part of him, small, cowardly, human, had believed them. Back in the Hall of Echoes, Drago fell to one knee. Blood leaked from the gaps in his armor. Psychic backlash scorched the floor around him. His will was a fraying thread, his mind burning from within. Wrath stood above him, also wounded but calm, not triumphant, not cruel, just tired. Do you understand now? He said. I understand. Nothing. Then you're close. Wrath knelt beside him. It's not chaos that kills us, Kaldor. It's the lie that we are untouched by it. That purity is a wall, not a journey. You speak like a demon. Then perhaps we should listen to demons more. You think they offer wisdom? They are the parts of us we cut out. The hunger, the fear, the ambition, the pain. Routh looked to the shattered glyphs around them. We can no longer pretend they aren't ours. Drago looked up, meeting Routh's eyes, and for the first time saw no heresy, only grief. Outside, Titan groaned, not from bombardment, from change. Wards twisted into new shapes. Symbols once carved to ward off demons now shimmered with dual meanings. Not welcoming, not surrender, understanding. The fortress monastery was becoming something new, not corrupted, evolved. A place not of denial, but of balance. In the hall, Drago slowly rose. If I let you live, he said, voice raw, what will you do? Lead them, teach them, prepare them. For what? For the war after the war, the one against ourselves. And if I kill you? Then nothing changes. The lie continues. The silence wins. Drago's blade trembled in his hand. For a moment, it hovered. Then, he dropped it. It rang against the stone like a funeral bell. Routh closed his eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me, Drago whispered. I didn't do it for you. Above, the storm began to clear, and the stars returned. But they looked different now, not because they had changed, because someone had finally looked at them without fear. The silence did not last. It never does. In the wake of Drago's choice, the fortress world of Titan transformed, not with fire or invasion, but with something far more terrifying. Honesty. For 10,000 years, the Grey Knights had been the Emperor's silent blade, incorruptible, unquestioning, absolute. But now the fractures were visible, not cracks of chaos or madness, but of thought, of doubt, and of memory long suppressed. Drago remained at the Hall of Echoes, unmoving, the Titans-Zord laid at his feet like a fallen crown. He said nothing. He issued no orders. He simply listened, for the first time in his long, cursed life. He listened. Across the bastions of Titan, voices rose. Arguments, confessions, tears. Librarians tore old texts apart, revealing hidden glyphs, fragments of ancient prophecies buried beneath layers of sanctioned dogma. In the archives of the Librarium Demoni, hidden beneath 3 layers of psychic seals, a single stasis vault clicked open, uncommanded. Within lay the Codex Umbra, sealed since the founding. It was no longer quiet. Its pages moved, not by demonic force, but by the weight of truth finally unchained. It read them now as much as they read it. Outside the fortress, The warp shimmered like a mirror cracked open. Where once grey nights had been invisible to the demonic mind, now the demons watched, not as predators, but as witnesses. They know, whispered a herald of Tzinch from its perch upon the rings of Jur. The veil lifts. One has chosen the third path, a champion or a martyr. Both, said the Prince of Change, and it smiled with all the mouths it had ever worn. Word spread beyond Titan, slowly, but not without consequence. In the Inquisition, agents whispered of heresy within the vault. Some spoke of purging Titan outright, others of containment. But some hesitated. A few among the Ordo Malleus had sensed it already. Ripples in their own thoughts, dreams that spoke of burning silver, of statues weeping not blood but hope. It was contagious, this shift. Not like disease, like memory returning after millennia of amnesia. Even the Sisters of Silence felt it. Their wards weakened, not from attack, but from release. The quietude fractured. Silence itself began to speak, and what it said was, "You have forgotten who you are." Routh stood before the assembled knights of the Third Brotherhood. No banners flew, no blessings were spoken, but no one had left. Even the most zealous among them, those who had once struck down brothers for the slightest impurity, stayed. "You are not fallen," he told them. "You are awake." He did not preach chaos. He did not blaspheme the Emperor. He did not burn sigils or invoke demons. He simply told them what they had always felt, buried beneath loyalty and silence, that their invincibility came not from purity, but from the refusal to question. And now, they had questions. Drago met Alaric once more in the Chapel of Blades, a hall of victory, of memory, of death. Alaric's armor was scorched. His gauntlet still trembled from where he'd disarmed a brother earlier that day, not out of anger, but fear of what he saw reflected in his eyes. "You let him live," Alaric said. Drago didn't answer. "You broke our doctrine." Still silence. "Why?" "Because doctrine is dead," Drago finally whispered. "Then what are we?" Drago turned to him. Eyes once aflame with wrath now held a strange calm. "We are the last hope of truth in an empire that forgot how to speak it. And if we fall, then at least we fall knowing." Outside the chapel, an alarm sounded, not from chaos, not from invasion, but from the void. A ship, black, silent, bearing no heraldry, no sigil, no light. It should not have been able to pierce Titan's wards. But it had. It docked at the outer ring without resistance, and from it stepped a figure clad in obsidian robes, bearing no weapons, no armor. Just a scroll sealed with the mark of the sigillite. His voice echoed across the fortress. "I bear a message from Malkador." The fortress froze. Even time, it seemed, stumbled at those words. "He is dead," Alaric whispered. "So is the Emperor," Drago said. "And yet, here we stand." The figure entered the throne chamber of the chapter master. He did not bow. He unsealed the scroll and read. The Grey Knights were never meant to be eternal. They were never meant to survive past the lie. You were the knife, you were the silence, but the silence has broken. Now you must choose. Be the flame that burns falsehood from the galaxy, or the ashes that remain when truth is denied. And with that, the figure vanished, not in warp light, not in flame, but as if he had never been. Only the scroll remained, still burning with words that had no ink, only will. Drago held the parchment. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from something worse, clarity. This is what he planned all along. Routh entered behind him. He didn't plan it. He hoped for it. What do we do now? We stop hunting demons and start hunting the silence. In the vaults of the Imperium, alarms sounded, inquisitors wept, and in the eye of terror, the gods of chaos turned to watch, not in mockery, but in curiosity, because for the first time in 10,000 years, the Grey Knights were no longer what they were, and no one, mortal, demon, or god, could say what they would become. The stars above Titan no longer shimmered as they once had. Once, they had been constant, silent guardians of the great work, pinpricks of cold fire etched into the tapestry of duty and sacrifice. Now, they pulse strangely, as if mourning, as if waiting, and on the grey marble surface of Titan, beneath its fortress monastery of obsidian and silver, a storm gathered, not of wind or void, but of decision. The Grey Knights were no longer untouched, they were no longer silent, and so the fortress sang, low, haunting, the psychic echo of 10,000 years of hidden truth, now bleeding through every seal and ward. The librarium vaults unravelled themselves, statues wept liquid silver, hallways warped to memory rather than design. The fortress became a cathedral of awakening, and awakening in the Imperium is treason. But no blade came yet, no exterminatus, not yet, because even the Inquisition was listening now, and listening changes everything. Kaldor Drygo stood at the edge of the vault gates. Beyond them was nothing but emptiness, the true void, where matter ended and meaning began. It had no name, this place. No map recorded it. Even the Elder refused to speak of it, and the demon Primarchs would not trespass here. And Drygo had been born for this final step. His armour bore no heraldry, no sigil of Titan, no badge of rank. He carried no sword, only memory, only guilt, only the last question no knight dared speak aloud. Was it ever real? He looked down at his gloved hands. They did not shake. The curse was quiet now, not cured, but heard, and that had made all the difference. He turned to face his brothers, what remained of them. The third brotherhood stood behind him, alongside Ralph, Alaric, and a dozen others whose names would be buried if they survived at all. They were not rebels, they were not traitors, they were something far more dangerous. They were uncertain, and in the Imperium, certainty is survival. But Drygo no longer believed in survival, only in truth. "This is the end," Drygo said. His voice was calm. It echoed across the vault like thunder muffled by snowfall. Not of us, but of what we were made to be. They called us pure, unbreakable, chosen. But they chose us to forget, to be blind, to be obedient. And we obeyed. We butchered worlds. We sanctified genocide. We destroyed what we never dared understand. In the name of the Emperor, who has not spoken in 10,000 years. A silence, heavy, sacred. But now we choose. We will not burn the Imperium. We will not kneel to chaos. We will not be weapons anymore. We will be witnesses. He raised his hand, and from the vault's threshold, a psychic pulse was released, not destructive, but illuminating. It spread like dawn across the warp and real space, invisible to mortals, but unmistakable to psychers, inquisitors, daemons, and gods alike. Not a scream, not a challenge, an invitation to remember. The pulse reached Terra. The golden throne shuddered. Tech priests fell silent mid-ritual. In the palace, the Null Maiden screamed without sound. And somewhere, beneath layers of vaults even the Emperor's chosen had forgotten, a single silver flame flickered in a room that should not exist. It did not go out. It flared. The pulse reached the eye of Terror. There 100 warbands convulsed. A keeper of secrets whispered Drago's name like a lover's gasp. A lord of change paused its 8 millennium-long strategy. Mortarion turned from his play crusade and remembered his brother, for just a moment, not with hatred, but with sorrow. And Abaddon, upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, gripped the hilt of Drachnion, and for the first time felt fear, not of defeat, but of change. The pulse reached the stars, and everywhere it touched, those bound to the warp, psyker, sorcerer, demon, prophet, and saint, felt it. A break in the pattern, not chaos, not law, choice. The Grey Knights did not fall that day, nor were they absolved. They simply chose to remember what they were before the silence, before they were cleansed of identity, before the warp touched their veins and their names were burned from every archive. They became the Grey once more, not in purity, but in understanding. Warriors, scholars, victims, murderers, monks, and perhaps, in some far-forgotten future, healers, but for now, witnesses. Drago stepped through the gate and was gone, not into the warp, not into death, but into the place between, the place where the first decision had been made, when humanity chose blindness over pain. He went to confront the origin, to find the lie beneath the creed, to speak not with demons, but with the first silence, and perhaps, if the galaxy could still bear it, to forgive. The Titansword lay untouched upon the floor of the vault. No one claimed it. No one raised it, because the war was no longer against demons. It was against the belief that nothing could change. And so, beneath a sky that no longer slept, as dying suns bled across the void like forgotten prayers, the fortress of Titan stood still, no longer hidden, no longer untainted, but true. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor dreamed, and in his dream he wept, not in sorrow, but in relief. The silence had finally ended,